Hi everyone, in this video we are going to discuss this topic, square of opposition. This is one of the most important topics that we have to study under the module logical reasoning, and if you think of this particular area, this is very easy as well. So if you know the basics of square of opposition, you can easily score marks for this area as well. Before moving into the topic, that is square of opposition, we have to first know the four basic types of categorical proposition. If you don't know which are the four different types of categorical proposition, it is not that easy for you to understand the concept of square of opposition as well. So first we will be looking at the four different types of categorical proposition. We can call it as A, E, I and O. These are the four basic types of categorical prepositions, and if you want to label these different types of prepositions, you can call it as universal affirmative. E type is known as universal negative. Then you have I type, which can be called as particular affirmative, and then we have the O type that can be labeled as particular negative. So we are labeling these different types of categorical preposition on the basis of the quality and the quantity of the preposition. Let's say if we take the first type, that is A type of preposition, we call it as universal affirmative. So the quantity there is universal and the quality there is affirmative. So what kind of a preposition is this? If you take this particular form that is given here, it says that all S is P. For example, if you are saying that all dogs are mammals, in that particular sentence or in that particular preposition, we are having a universal perspective, that is all dogs, universal, are mammals, right? So that is affirmative. We are affirming that all dogs are mammals. So that is the idea behind these different labels that we are giving to these different types of prepositions. So A type is universal affirmative. You can think of it as all SSP or all dogs are mammals. And then we have the E type of preposition, that is universal negative. So what's the form there? No S is P. If you're saying that no dogs are cats, that is a universal negative statement, or that is a universal negative preposition. Then we have the I type preposition, that we call it as particular affirmative. That means some S is P. We are just taking a particular session and we are affirming that particular session of S is P. So that is some S is P. For example, if we are saying that some artists are musicians, in that particular case we are taking a particular group and we are affirming, right? So in that case, I type preposition can be called as particular affirmative. Then comes the O type preposition, that can be labeled as particular negative. Particular negative. What's the form there? It's some S is not P. If you are saying that some artists are not musicians, in that case we are taking an example of a particular negative preposition. So these are the four different types of categorical prepositions. So you have to be very thorough about these different types, because square of opposition is actually a diagram which represents the relationship between these different or these four basic type of categorical preposition. That's why we have already discussed about the four basic types of categorical preposition. So if you know which are the four types of prepositions that we have already discussed in this video, now this particular area will be very easier for you. So basically, as I have already mentioned, square of opposition is actually a diagram which represents the relationship between these different types of prepositions. So if you consider this particular diagram that is given here, you can get an idea about this entire concept of square of opposition. So I have already said that we have four different types of preposition, we have A type, then we have E type, I type and O type. We have universal affirmative, universal negative, particular affirmative and particular negative prepositions, right. So, if you consider the universal affirmative, that is the A type of preposition, and the universal negative, that is E type preposition. The relationship between these two types, A type and E type, can be called as contraries. Okay. Then comes I type and O type. You have the particular affirmative and particular negative. The relationship between these two can be called as subcontraries. And then we have another set, that is A and O and E and I, right. This is universal affirmative and this is particular negative. So, they are different in their quality as well as quantity. That is universal, this is particular. That is affirmative and this is negative, right. So, they are different in their quality as well as quantity. So, what do you call these types of preposition? What is the relationship between these two types of preposition? That can be called as contradictories. So, the things that I have mentioned about A and O type of prepositions can be, or it is applicable to E and I type of prepositions as well, right. So, this is universal negative and this is particular affirmative. So, they are different in their quality as well as quantity. This is universal and this is particular, and also this is negative whereas this is affirmative. So, in that respect, we can call these two sets, A and O and E and I, as contradictories. Now, we are moving to the next type, that is subalternation or subalterns. So, we have another set which includes A and I and E and O, right. So, what is the peculiarity of these two combinations? If you consider A and I, you can say that A is universal affirmative, right, and this is particular affirmative. So, the relationship between universal affirmative and particular affirmative can be called as subalterns or subalternation, and that can be applicable in this scenario as well. You have universal negative and particular negative. So, they are similar in their quality, but they are different in their quantity, right. So, in that kind or that kind of combinations can be called as, or the relationship between these two sets, A and I and E and O, can be called as subalternation. So, this is the first thing that you have to understand. First, we have discussed about the 4 different types of categorical preposition, and when it comes to square of preposition, the first thing, the first perspective that you have or you should have from an exam point of view is that you have to identify the names of these different relationship. What is the relationship between A and D, or what is the term that we can use to refer to the relationship between A and D, I and O, A and I, and another set is E and O, and also the contradictories, right, A and O and E and I. So, this is the first thing that you have to understand. The second thing, the next point that you have to consider when it comes to square of opposition is the nature of the relationship between these different types of prepositions. So, that is another important area that we have to consider, or that is an area from which we can expect questions as well. So, try to understand the names, the labels that you can give in or you can give to different types of relationship that is in between the basic categorical preposition, and after that you have to find out or you have to study the nature of the relationship between these different types of preposition. So, if you consider contradictories, we have already said that contradictories are A and O and E and I. So, these are contradictories. So, what is their relationship? Both statements cannot be true or false together. So, that is the nature of the relationship between contradictory prepositions. So, if one is true, then obviously the next one will be false. So, that is the kind of relationship that we can understand in between the contradictory prepositions in square of opposition. So, when you hear the term contradictories, you have to understand both these statements cannot be true or false together. So, that is the understanding that you need to have when it comes to this contradictories. Then we have contraries, right. So, which are contraries? A and E. A and E can be called as contraries, right. So, that is universal affirmative and universal negative. So, these two prepositions or statements can be called as contraries. So, how are they related? Both cannot be true together, but they can be false together. That means if one is true, then the other cannot be true. That is the idea. They cannot be true together, but they can be false together. So, if you understand this logic behind the relationship between these different propositions, then it is very easier for you to score marks in this area as well. So, contradictories, both statements cannot be true or false together. Contraries, both cannot be true together, but they can be false together. If one is true, then the other one will be false. They cannot be true together. But if one is false, there is a possibility of having the other one is false or true, because they can be false together. There is no problem in that. But if one is true, obviously the other will be other cannot be true with that particular proposition. So, that is the idea. So, both cannot be true together, but they can be false together. So, this is in the case of contraries. Now, we are moving to the next type, that is subcontraries. So, when it comes to subcontraries, what is the nature of the relationship between the propositions? Both statements cannot be false together, but they can be true together. So, when we discussed about contraries, we said that they cannot be true together, but they can be false together. But when it comes to subcontraries, this is quite different. It is just the opposite of what we have discussed in contraries. Both statements cannot be false together, but they can be true together. So, that is subcontraries. And then we are moving to the next relationship, that is subalternation. So, when it comes to subalternation, which are the sets that you can consider under that particular label? We have A and I, that is a subalternation relationship, and also we have E and O, right. So, how are these different propositions in subalternation, or that kind of a relationship exist? If universal is true, then particular will be definitely true. So, when we have discussed about subalternation, I have already said to you that their quality is similar, but they are different in their quantity, right. So, in that case, if if you consider a set of subalterns or subalternation relationship, then in that you will be having a universal statement as well as a particular statement, right. A and I, E and O, universal and particular statements can be seen in both these sets, right. So, if you consider subalternation or this particular relationship, you have to identify, or you have to remember that if the universal statement or the proposition is true, then the particular will be definitely true. But if the particular statement is false, then universal will be definitely false. So, if the universal is true, particular is true. If the particular is false, then the universal will be definitely false. So, this is the idea that you have to keep in your mind. So, make sure that you are having a proper idea about these kind of relationship, universal, particular. If that is a relationship, then it must be true, and if it is in the other way, if particular is false, then obviously universal will be false. You have to make sure that you know this idea. Only then you can easily answer questions for this or the questions from this particular area. So, this is the next idea that you need to have. First, we have studied about the various terms that you can give to the various relationship that we have figured out in the score of opposition, and then we have moved to the nature of relationship as well. So, once more we will be just revising this area. Contradictories, what is the nature of the relationship between contradictories? Both statements cannot be true or false together, and in contraries it is both cannot be true together, but they can be false together. And then we have subcontraries, in that both statements cannot be false together, but they can be true together. And then we have subalternation. In subalternation, what you need to keep in your mind is that if the universal proposition is true, then the particular proposition will be also true. If the particular is false, then the universal will be definitely false. Okay. Another important idea that we need to answer the questions from this particular area is that we have discussed about the 4 basic categorical propositions that includes all, no, some and some not. But there are different terms, or there are some alternative terms that we can use instead of these different types of terms that we have already discussed. So, if you have a statement, or if you have given a proposition in which you have given any, every or each, all these terms actually contribute, or all these terms can be used instead of all. So when you see a preposition which is having any, every or each, please keep in mind that is a universal affirmative statement. Then you have none and never for no. So these are different alternates that we can use instead of no. Then if you consider some, there are certain terms that can be used instead of some as well. At least, almost, maximum, often, a few, a lot of, a little, all these terms can be used in the place of some. So if you have given a preposition which includes any of these terms, please to remember that that is a particular affirmative preposition. Moving to the next last one, that is some not. Some not is a particular negative statement or a preposition, and you can use various terms instead of that as well. Hardly, rarely, seldom, scarcely, and all not. So these are the various terms that you can use in the place of some not. So please do have an idea about this particular thing, this table as well, because at times in exam we cannot expect that all the time they will be giving prepositions with all, no, some and some not. At times they will be using different terms that is given in this table. So when you are given something like that, or when you are seeing any of these terms in the question paper, please do not get confused. Please have an idea about the various terms that you can use instead of the ones that we have already discussed. So that's it for square of opposition. If you have this much of idea in this particular area, if you know this much about this concept, then it is very easier for you to answer the questions from this particular area that are asked in NTA's NTA UGC NET paper 1. So now we are moving to some of the previous year questions that were asked from this particular area, and then you will understand how easy is this area to answer in this particular exam if we know the basics of square of opposition. So here you have the first question. This was asked in June 2020. Consider the following prepositions. You have given two prepositions, and which are they? No television as a computer. Some televisions are not computer. So you are given two prepositions, and the question goes like this. According to the square of opposition, the above opposition is called as, and you have four different options as well. So if you consider the prepositions that are given here, the first preposition is no television is a computer. No television is a computer, right? So this is a universal negative preposition, right? And if you consider the next one, some televisions are not computer. So that is a particular negative preposition. So what is the relationship between a universal negative and a particular negative preposition? What do you call? What is the relationship that you can label, or what is the term that you can use for the relationship between these two, universal negative and particular negative? That is subalternation, right? That's the case. Which is the right answer? You have the options subalternation, subcontrary, contradiction, and contrary. So the right answer for this question is option 1, that is subalternation, right? Okay. Now we are moving to the next question. This was asked in June 2020 NET exam again. So here is the question. Given below are four prepositions. Two of them are related in such a way that they cannot be true, although they can be false. Select the chord that states those two prepositions. So you are given four different prepositions here, and you are asked to find out two prepositions from these given statements or prepositions that cannot be true, although they can be false. They cannot be true, but they can be false. So they cannot be true together, but they can be false together. If you consider the options or the prepositions that are given, we have all men are honest, no men are honest, some men are honest, and some men are not honest. So if you consider the relationship, the nature of relationship that is given here, it says that it cannot be true together, but they can be false together. So they are contraries. So this relationship stands for the relationship between the contraries, right? So which are the contrary statements? We have universal affirmative and universal negative. So you have to simply find out the universal affirmative and universal negative prepositions from the following. Which are they? All men are honest, no men are honest. This is a universal affirmative and this is a universal negative statement. They can be called as contraries because they cannot be true together, but they can be false together. If that's the case, which is the right answer? A and B only, right? And the right option here is option 1. So, the right answer for this question is option 1. Next question, this was asked in July 2019. All students cleared their examination and few students did not clear their examination. This is an instance of, and if you consider this particular statement or the prepositions that are given here, it says that all students cleared their examination. That is a universal affirmative preposition, right? All students cleared their examination. Then we have another preposition which states that few students did not clear their examination. Few students did not clear their examination. So, that is particular negative. So, this is basically universal affirmative and this is particular negative. So, they are contradictories, right? So, universal affirmative and particular negative. A, then we have O. So, they are contradictories. If that's the case, which is the right answer here? That is option 1, contradictories. Alright. Then we have next question which was asked in June 2019. All republics are grateful and some republics are not grateful cannot both be true and they cannot both be false. This is called as. So, it says that if you consider two different prepositions, the first one is all republics are grateful and the next one is some republics are not grateful. So, this is universal affirmative and this is particular negative. So, basically these are contradictories. From that statement itself we can understand that. And then it says that it also gives us the relationship pattern or the nature of the relationship as well. They cannot both be true and they cannot both be false. So, the right answer for this question is option 2, that is contradictories. Another question from December 2018. Among the following, there are two statements which cannot be true together but can be false together. Select the code that represents them. So, it says that there are two statements which cannot be true together but can be false together. They cannot be true together but they can be false together. So, they are contraries, right? They are contraries. If that's the case, if you consider the statements or the prepositions given here, which are the contrary statements? That is universal affirmative and universal negative. You have to simply find out the universal affirmative as well as the universal negative statements from the following. If that's the case, we have all bats are mammals and some bats are mammals. So, that is A and D. A and D is option 2. So, the right answer for this particular question is option 2. So, in this video, we have discussed about score of opposition, a very important concept under the module logical reasoning. So, this is, as I have already mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is very important as well as very easy for you to learn as well. So, if you know the basics that we have discussed in this video, this would be very easier, or this would really help you in answering the questions from this as well. So, what I need in a NET preparation is having a very good strategy, having a very good study pattern that you need to follow, right? So, if you want to have a guidance, a proper guidance, or if you want to make a proper strategy to face your NET exam, Appleby Academy is very happy to help you out there in that particular area. So, we have both classroom classes and online classes available here. So, if you like to know more about our courses, you can just contact the number given in the description box and you will be getting more details of that as well. So, I hope this video will be really helpful in your preparation for NTA UGC NET Paper 1, and thanks for watching.